When people talk about communication skills, they often think about public speaking, standing in front of an audience and discoursing to an entire crowd. This is important and valuable in a lot of contexts, whether giving a presentation or being able to interact with larger groups of people that people are normally used to dealing with. But this is only a small slice of what communication can and should be. So much of the most important parts of communication in our lives are one-on-one, in conversation, within a relationship, building community and shaping culture, all the way from just a simple one-on-one conversation. Whether we're networking, whether we are selling, whether we are negotiating, whether we are working with a client, working with a coworker, whether you are a parent dealing with a child, all of these things, the majority of that relationship, the way that relationship is embodied is in conversing with them, talking with them, and listening to them. So I'm going to talk about some fundamental understandings of how to be more effective in conversation. I'm going to introduce two models specifically that will help to strategically maximize your conversational potential across all of these domains. The first is a conversational cycle, a sequence of topics that we can integrate into any conversation and should integrate into most. I use a four-letter word for an acronym that helps to structure it, and that word is CARE. It has C, A, R, and E. The first step is to connect on a deeper level. Second, ask about their priorities. Third, resolve a challenge. Fourth, establish commitment to the next step. C-A-R-E, care. Let's go through each of these and how these work in a conversational flow. First, connect on a deeper level. Whether it's your first conversation or your 101st conversation, you should take wherever you are at in that relationship and deepen it just a little bit or more, depending on the context. Connect on a deeper level. Share vulnerability. Welcome and respond positively to vulnerability shared with you, even more important. Establish common ground. Build rapport by whatever means necessary. Start there. Second, ask about their priorities. Find out what is burningly important to them right then, whether it is a purpose that they are excited about, a concern they have fear around, whether it is a challenge or a circumstance that's new or is on top of their mind. Find out what is on their radar. Then you get to then work to help add value by resolving a challenge. Now, this resolving a challenge fundamentally is simply adding value. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to fix whatever problem they just surfaced, whether they surfaced one or not. We don't have to fix everything. Sometimes resolving a challenge is simply being a listening ear. Sometimes it is providing a hug. Sometimes it's adding a smile. Sometimes it's referring somebody else who's providing a service that might solve the problem that they're looking for. Maybe it's asking clarifying questions to provide a sense of awareness around they can move forward. That's what coaching often ultimately is. Sometimes it's selling a product or service that you provide. If it happens naturally or organically, ultimately that will arise with the clients it is appropriate to raise those kinds of offers with. But the goal isn't to insert your value of whatever you do as a vocation in every single conversation. It's from the flow of building connection to asking about what's important to them, and then naturally from those things, seeking how you can add value. And not reversing those order is super critical. The last step should be at the end of every conversation, even if you've forgotten all the other ones. Establish commitment to the next step, whatever that next step is. It may be letting them know, hey, I'll reach out via email with those links that we chatted about, or hey, next time I'll see you, I'll bring that book I mentioned, or hey, I'll see you tonight at the mixer, or hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you at church next week. Whatever it is, acknowledge whatever the next link in that conversational cycle will be whenever you're going to be reconnecting with them again. Emphasize and make it explicit that this is not a one-off thing. You haven't just made one conversation with them. you are laying a foundation for many conversations with them in the future. That way, when you reach back out and you reconnect, you're fulfilling a promise that you made in establishing trust. A key word of clarity. I mentioned earlier that you should not reverse the order of the middle two. Those should be separate. A lot of networking advice out there will recommend that you should make sure you get your elevator pitch into every conversation when you're meeting somebody new. Hogwash. If at all possible, avoid letting them know what you do in the first conversation. Seems strange, but I strongly recommend trying this. Do not emphasize what you do and the values you provide. Listen first. If you spend your entire time only gathering information from the other person, if you have the information to be able to follow up, if you have made them feel heard and seen and listened to, you'll be 10 times more likely to have a successful follow-up and a second conversation in which they will be more likely to ask about what you're doing naturally and with earnest, sincere curiosity. Even if you give them no information about you, as long as you have their information to follow up with them, establish commitment to the next step, if you know who they are and what's valuable to them, you will be able to more effectively serve them in the long run. If you try and rush to add value, it negates all of the connection that you've made and can come across as disingenuous. So this is the care cycle. Connect on a deeper level, ask about the priorities, resolve a challenge, establish commitment to the next step. This is the care cycle, and this is the first model that I'm introducing to you in this short video. I've done more in-depth webinars on this that dive into further. This is just a short introduction. The second model I want to introduce you to is the 4-tier of belonging model. There are 4 tiers, and I've already hinted at them in this video already. The first one is the conversation, an individual connection between two people in a moment in time. It happens via conversation. If you extend that through time, if you're following through and following up with people and establishing commitment to the next step and then following through with that next step, you will have multiple connections strung together, and that is what constitutes a relationship. But then if you triangulate that, where you have 3 or more people, not just 2, who are together oriented towards a common goal, that becomes a community. And a community has the fertile ground for the emergence of a lot of different substructures. There's honor-shame systems, there's hero, exemplars, there's origin stories that emerge, there's common values upon which you align and are oriented towards that common goal. There's a lot of things that come into play at this point. It gets complex very fast when you add more people. But the core essence of what a community fundamentally is that it is 3 or more people oriented towards a common goal. But then what happens if you take those 3 or more people and you extend that through time? Just like we did with a connection extending through time to make a relationship, if we take a community and extend that through time, what we result in is a culture. A culture is when you are able to propagate values from one generation to the next. Successive generations of people within community oriented towards a consistent common goal. And it traditions this by means of a lot of different factors. Again, I've done webinars diving into this more in depth and what the dimensions of culture are and how tradition operates and the difference between a cult and a culture and how to use these to leverage success in your business, your organization, your family, and your personal life. These 4 tiers of belonging together constitute your network. So all of the connections, all of the relationships, all of the communities, and all the cultures that I am a part of, that I belong to in my life, overlapping with each other and intermix with each other, constitute my personal network. Your collection of connections, relationships, communities, and cultures constitute your network. Together, if we are in a relationship or sharing any of these kinds of things, we have a shared network together. The idea is that when you have lots of overlapping circles of these communities and cultures and so on, this robustly reinforces all the relationships and magnifies the impact of each of the conversations and connections within those networks. What's fascinating is that many studies have proven that across every measurable factor of success, from longevity, financial security, mental health, physical health, everything, These all correlate directly with the robustness and health of your network. Just the number of connections alone correlates directly with success, causatively. This means that by simply increasing the number of connections you have, increasing the breadth of your network, you will get better in everything. If you deepen it, it multiplies that impact as well. What's fascinating, and this is where the magic gets in, is that if I'm having a conversation with a person who's at one end of a community, we both share relationships with somebody else in that community, even if that person is not there in that conversation, that those relationships with that third party increase and the entire community increases in value, which means that by simply having one-on-one conversations and deepening value at any community that you're a part of, you actually increase the well-being of every single person in that community. It's a powerful ripple effect. And it happens in the negative as well. They've done studies that show that if somebody is a smoker, people 4 or 5 degrees of separation away from them who don't know them are 70 or more times more likely to actually also be a smoker. So this is something that we have a direct responsibility for, to help those around us within the communities that we share with them, to be a positive influence, to use the care cycle to constantly resolve challenges for each other and grow the impact and the health and well-being of our entire community and our entire culture. This is how we can influence society, just in a simple one-on-one conversation over coffee. I'll see you soon.